I want to talk about the homeless figures, which have reached an unprecedented high, Minister, and there are now 3,200 homeless children in this country. When you hear that number, what do you think?
Look, those figures are deeply upsetting, and I recognise anything that I say today as Minister is going to be little comfort to any of those families who are homeless right now. But we also have to look at those measures that will, in the short term, impact on homelessness in terms of extending the period for notice to quit, in terms of greater flexibility for local authorities to support HAP payments. But ultimately, the way we address homelessness in this country is through building more housing. And that's why we've €4.5 billion in the budget next year for more social and affordable homes.
So we've heard this from groups representing homeless people and advocating on their behalf as we face into a very tough winter. And they're saying, why isn't there a ban on evictions? We had it during the pandemic. We saw the homeless numbers drop as a result. And is this winter not akin to a pandemic scenario here? We have people really to the pin of their collar who would find it desperately hard should a landlord choose to evict them.
Well, I know that the Minister for Housing is engaging with the Attorney-General in terms of the legal provisions around any potential restriction on evictions over this winter.
Well, we did it during the pandemic. Can it be done again?
Well, that's what we have to understand in terms of the Attorney-General. The pandemic was one particular health emergency, and we have to understand if something like that can be done again.
Is it being explored then?
But it has to be remembered that what the Housing Agency said yesterday in terms of these figures was one of the key issues that is driving the increase is the lack of availability of HAP rental properties.
I'm thinking in the short term, Minister, and for people who are very worried.
But that impact is a short term impact.
You know, 60 families, I think, in the month of August alone, going into homelessness, and I think some 1,500 families in that situation, and many more who aren't registered, who are sleeping on relatives' couches and really desperate scenarios, but they're not even in the system, Kevin. On whether something like this with a crisis response is necessary this winter, and whether it's something government are exploring.
Well, you think back to when the idea of emergency hubs in hotels were introduced. Do you remember when they set up that there would be kind of hotel rooms, but families would also have access to play areas and cooking facilities? And at the time, it was seen as like an outrageous scandal. And now they've just become so normal. It's part of the system now. It's not an emergency measure anymore. And so you can bring in an eviction ban, absolutely, for the winter. But the numbers will still be back in February and March and April. So it has to be something bigger than that. I think we're gone past plaster stage, because every time we put a plaster on it, the bleed gets bigger. And maybe that's the wrong language to use, but the problem is getting worse every time. So none of the plasters have worked. And I don't know that any of us sitting here can give you the answer to this, but it seems inexplicable that the figure for homelessness overall, kids and adults, has been around 10,000 now for 4, 5, 6 years. And that just seems inexplicable that we can't seem to get it even down to 8, 7, 5,000.
Holly, on this, pointing there to not a lot of government progress at all in this area. These aren't statistics. They're families,
they're people.
They're children. We don't know where they are, what sort of situations they're in tonight, but they're vulnerable.
I think, just to hear that, oh, well, they're consulting the AG is just a sickening thing to hear, because Fine Gael declared a housing emergency in 2014, and now we're going to consult the AG. There's been a 47% increase in child homelessness in the last year. And now we're going to consult the AG about potentially having a ban on evictions. There should be a rent freeze. There should be a ban on evictions. There was a briefing for the Cabinet Subcommittee on Housing recently that said we will not be meeting our housing targets this year. They're not even spending their full budget. They haven't built one social or affordable home. These are the kind of things, and like you say, these are children. And children who are homeless we know all of the obvious things that go with it. They're also more likely to be bullied, less likely to have friends, more likely to be hospitalised. There's all of these things. It's gone beyond the point of consulting the AG about a potential ban on evictions. I don't understand how that's the conversation we're having this evening when the housing disaster is at such an unprecedented scale. It's Just
Minister, would you wish to respond to that, just about the crisis we're facing and that idea that short-term it's a sticking plaster?
Well, I suppose in response to what Holly said, ultimately the government has to act legally as well, and that's an issue. And you know, Minister O'Brien has been clear they are engaging with the Attorney General in terms of that short-term response that Kevin said in terms of this winter. But ultimately, coming back to the core point, the way we will tackle and address and reduce those numbers of families in homelessness is by building more homes. That's why we have that very significant investment, capital investment, 4.5 billion to deliver 12,000 social homes, 5,500 affordable homes next year. That is what is going to actually make a meaningful difference for homelessness in our country.
Unfortunately, those targets are not going to be met.
And that is another day's work, another night's work, and we will be
there's another aspect.
we'll be returning to that.